Hello, welcome to the Everything Medical Podcast. And today our guest is Gaby. She is a recently admitted medical student. Congratulations. Who gave us the pleasure of talking to her. So we just wanted to start off by asking, can you just give us like a brief background on your education leading up to this?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Gabby. I went to Rutgers and I graduated January 2021. So recent grad. I majored in biotechnology and minored in biochemistry. And I just got accepted to Hackensack Meridian Medical School. And I'm waiting for Robert Wood Johnson. So we'll see.
That's great. So I guess we just kind of wanted to start off with really talking about the process of getting into med school because it is very stressful. So I guess we'll start off with the big one that nobody likes, and that's the MCAT. So what was it like studying for the MCAT, and was there anything that you wish you knew beforehand that you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. So the MCAT was like crazy. Sam and I met right after I took the MCAT and I was like still all over the place. But I took the MCAT in April and then I applied in June. So we were on a time crunch. Um, I when I was first studying for the MCAT, I kind of looked around to find a schedule to study because I work best on a study schedule, and I know advisors and other people will always say make a schedule. That's the best way to do it. Stick to your schedule, plan days to take off, things like that. So I made roughly a 3-month schedule, though I had technically started studying already like for a month. And then I had practice exams in my last month and lots of practice questions. And then finally, the MCAT was the last part of that. Um, Something that I would have liked to have known is that I could have reached out to others, even anonymous people, like on the MCAT page on Reddit, to find somebody to hold me accountable because this was still mid-pandemic and I had nobody to talk to. I had nobody to relate to about the MCAT, and I would just let my studying kind of fall by the like wayside. I would wake up late and not do the work I was planning to do, or do it kind of not with full attention. So I think that's something that's really important. Find your friends, reach out to others, find a study buddy. And I think the schedule at least was a good part. So definitely make a schedule.
When talking about the MCAT and its importance into getting into medical school, getting a good score on it, would you say that your GPA or your MCAT is more important? Because I hear this a lot, and a lot of pre-med kids always ask
Yeah.
this, and I've always wondered that. Like, what do you think about it?
Okay. My GPA pulled me. I'm not gonna lie. I did pretty well on the MCAT. I scored around the 80th and up percentile. So that's typically where you want to aim, though I didn't get the score that I was hoping for, but I still shot my shot. But I would say it really comes down to the entirety of everything you've done. It depends on GPA and MCAT and experiences and how you write about those experiences. So while I did have a good GPA, and I think that kind of set off my sort of lower MCAT score, I think it was kind of the collective, like the good enough MCAT score, the great GPA, the good experiences that kind of pulled me through. So I wouldn't say it's one or the other. Do your best at everything you can do, and that's kind of the way to go.
Talking about some of the experiences that you've had, could you kind of go into that and talk about those a little bit?
So when I was a freshman, the first thing I jumped right into was research, especially with my major, which is a really research heavy major. I reached out to a PI and I got into a lab right away, and I started doing research on a project under a grad student. So I think that was the biggest part of my application because I just had so many hours in the lab. But as a freshman slash sophomore, I also kind of explored around. I shadowed, not that much, but a little bit. I volunteered in a hospital by my school, so Robert Wood Johnson, and I pulled up my resume for this because honestly, it's all a blur at this point. um, and I worked a few clinical jobs, and then I recently became an EMT with Sam, which is how we met. But things were kind of thrown off with the pandemic. I know this happened for a lot of students, that a lot of clinical things kind of just hit a wall. So I had some clinical experience here and there. I didn't have all the hours a lot of other people had, but my one big experience that was a whole 4-year endeavor was the research. So that's kind of what I did.
And so from these experiences, do you think they've like changed your view on medicine and made you a better medical student in any way? And is there any particular one that you think had the biggest impact on you personally?
So I think when I first came to college and started looking around for clinical experiences, I was in the mindset of I need clinical hours so that I can put it on my resume. And I didn't really enjoy the things I was doing. More so, I just was booking the time. So when I first started, again, with the very minimal shadowing and the hospital volunteering, those were kind of experiences that I booked for hours, though I had wished that I had taken a little bit more away from those. And then some of my more recent experiences mid-pandemic kind of changed my view on medicine, as I was like right before applying. But I became an EMT, which was kind of a staple in my application. I really, really love being an EMT. I'm an EMT now, still do it. And I work for an ophthalmologist as a scribe. And both of those experiences were kind of key in making me see so many different sides of medicine, because the clinic versus the back of an ambulance is really, really different. So I think mostly my experiences just kind of gave me like the feel for different fields of medicine more so. And I do wish that my earlier experiences, I had taken at least that away from what I had done, shadowing and other things. But I definitely think that like your opportunity to get clinical experiences, you should do your best to learn what you like about medicine and what kind of medicine you like. You know what I'm saying?
Do you have an idea of what kind of medicine you wish to pursue in the future?
Yeah, so I have been thinking a little bit about it, and I definitely am interested in emergency medicine now after being an EMT. I don't think I'm going to do ophthalmology. It's just maybe a little repetitive for me.
So I know you're taking a gap year right now. So why did you choose to take a gap year, and how have you liked it so far? Would you advise it to any other undergraduate students?
So I'm going to be honest, everything was a blur. I chose to take a gap year, and I think it was really because I just wasn't ready to study for the MCAT, and maybe I just wanted a little bit more time to focus on my coursework before taking the MCAT. So I fully graduated college before I took the MCAT. So I graduated, I crammed, I took the MCAT, and I applied. So I think when deciding to take a gap year, give it a little bit more thought than I did, but it's really up to you. I know people who have and have not taken gap years, and a lot of people really do enjoy the gap year. It's kind of an opportunity to sit back and breathe, because when you're going a million miles an hour in college and then taking the MCAT and then applying, it can be so easy to just get lost in all the work. So I'm really glad that I took a gap year, especially now that I'm like getting a moment to sit back and relax. It's definitely a well-needed break.
What would you say the biggest deciding factor was for you when deciding which medical school you wanted to go to?
There was none. I was debating taking a second gap year after getting my score back, and all my friends were like, just throw the spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. My biggest thing was that I wanted to stay near my friends and family, which are pretty much all located here in New Jersey. But I did reach out and I applied to a lot of schools in my score range and in my GPA range, though that doesn't always matter that much. But I did all the New Jersey schools and then a couple in New York, Connecticut, you know, all this East Coast area, and then a few across the country. So that's kind of how I did it. And I did it really based on how many schools they advise you to apply to, which is somewhere between 10 and 30. So That's kind of what I did.
So with all this being said, what would you say was the hardest part of your entire journey to medical school? And do you have any advice, or if you don't, it's okay because it's not easy, but do you have any advice on how you dealt with it?
Sure. I think personally, and this definitely doesn't relate to everyone, the hardest part was the MCAT. And I don't think it was because of the difficulty of the exam, but I think it was really because of how isolated I was while studying for the exam. I like made myself miserable when trying to study for it, because I put so much pressure on myself and I had all these things to do and I just wasn't living up to the standard that I wanted to be at. And so I just made it more difficult for myself than it needed to be. And I think that's really what it was, especially because it was a big change from college. Like even college has like structure, which I know for some people it doesn't, but college, I had structure to my weeks. And then when I was studying for the MCAT, it was like, okay, wake up, open a book, study, go to bed. So I think it was like the distinction of getting used to a different exam and studying for that was so difficult for me. And again, the pressure with applying literally right after I got my score back. So it does not need to be that hard. I would definitely say, again, find a study buddy, stick to a plan. And that's probably how I would have made it a little bit more pleasant for myself. But there's a lot of difficult things, classes are hard. So
Yeah, definitely not for the lighthearted.
yeah.
And on the other end of the spectrum, what would you say was like other than getting into medical school, because that's awesome, but what would you say was the most rewarding part of all of this, or just like your favorite part of the entire process?
I would say some of the most rewarding parts of doing all of this is just having little moments. As an EMT, you get to have little moments with patients. I love having kids in the back of the ambulance. They're so sweet. Like you show them all the gadgets back there. You ask them about their favorite sport in class. So getting to relate to patients is a really, really fun part, kind of one of the main drivers that have pushed me towards this career path. Other things, meeting people with similar ideals as your own and getting to vibe with cool people. And then it's always fun to get a good grade or something here or there and feel successful. So
Awesome. For the last point of the podcast, we wanted to ask you if you could give us any advice for us and other undergraduate students that want to go into medical school. What advice would you give them, and what would you say?
I would definitely say two things. Give yourself the time to find what you really like about the field, because as I said, when I was first getting into some of these clinical experiences, I was just booking hours and I wasn't really thinking, what do I like about this? Do I want to do this? What is my favorite part of being here? What is my favorite part of patient care? Things like that. Giving yourself the time to explore all of the different paths of medicine, because there are so many. A clinic versus a hospital versus an ambulance, things like that. So give yourself the time to find the things you like about the field, and also give yourself the time to step back every once in a while and breathe. I know it's a ton of material all the time, lots of really challenging classes, a terribly long and arduous exam, lots of application fees and so much work. So give yourself the time to step back and be able to relate to friends and family. I definitely could not have made it through without like some of my college friends. They've seen me through all of the roller coaster that was taking that exam, and all of the roller coaster that was having some of the hardest classes ever. So definitely give yourself the time to step back and also find things you like about medicine. Explore, reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us, and congratulations again on medical school.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was nice seeing you, Sam. It's nice meeting you, Ron.
Thanks for coming on, Gabby. Take care.
Of course. Okay. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.